Welcome to Industrial Marketing Live. I'm Erin Burrish, a senior strategist here at Gorilla 76, the industrial marketing agency, and one of your IML hosts. Today, we're joined by another of our senior strategists, Moby Hayat. Since joining the company, Moby has worked with a lot of industrial businesses that don't use a CRM or marketing automation platform map. But he's never allowed that challenge to prevent him from making data-driven decisions. So we asked him to give us a window into his brain and his computer screen today to help those of us who are marketing without the ideal tech stack to graduate from, the vanity metrics hamster wheel to create some reports that will help you tell a story of what's working or not with your marketing program. Also, I'll just note for the podcast recording, if you're listening today, we will be doing some screen sharing. So highly recommend checking out the YouTube recording as well to get the full effect. But Moby will do his best to kind of narrate what's happening on screen as we go. So Moby, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, excited to be here. Let's talk Excel and reporting.
Oh, yeah. I know we preach the importance of CRMs and marketing automation platforms a lot here at Gorilla. We work with all of our clients to implement those, but in the manufacturing space, it can be pretty common not to have one because those platforms, they cost money. You need a buy-in from multiple stakeholders. You need people to actually use it properly for the data to be valuable. And, it can take years for that type of implementation to happen, but you still want, to get some data. So Moby, how does it limit your marketing when you don't have a CRM or a map in place?
Yeah, when we think of marketing without a CRM, without reporting, it just becomes an activity that we're doing for the sake of doing the activity. And at the end of the day, the goal of marketing is to generate revenue, which can be reverse engineered into leads, pipeline opportunities, and actual revenue. And if we don't measure that, we cannot say like, this is working, this is not working. Was Q1 better? Was Q2 worse? What is happening? Why are things working as well as they might be? Or why are they not working as well as they might be? Because, I'm a marketing nerd. I can go into LinkedIn Ads Manager all day long and poke at stuff. But executives and our business leaders probably want to know what business outcome is this driving? And without being able to report on that and visualize it, we're just doing marketing as an activity and not a driver of business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you don't have those tools at your disposal, are you just supposed to throw up your hands in frustration? Moby, I think you would say no. And that's what we're going to talk about today is kind of manual reporting and how you can start getting some traction there. So Moby, do you want to kind of start talking about like what the core problem you're trying to solve with manual reporting is? And
100%. We've all been in situations in which we don't have the data that we want and we can't report to the level we want. And sometimes I'll share an example right here before I talk about this. I think data is super useful to be able to tell a story of marketing and its impact on business. There's always things like CTR, reach, and impressions, which doesn't really get pulled into what executives see. That's what really we care about. But I want to share with you an example. This is something that I just made up over time. This is a while ago, which is struggling to figure out. You can see my LinkedIn screenshot, right? Here, you can look at data and say, okay, it seems that we're getting more leads, right? But until you actually build a story around that and are able to get this data, this doesn't tell you anything about the business. This does. And ideally would like to be able to have data about marketing and what it can do in this format. If it's going up like this, it's great. If not, we can figure that out. But the problem right now that we have is, question for you guys. How many of you here don't have a CRM or can't report to the level? Drop it in the chat, because what's happening here is we don't have data. I can't tell you as a marketer, what has lead volume been like this quarter? What are the trends that we see? Are things going up or down? We did 25 trade shows in Q1 and Q2? What was the impact on lead volume and opportunity from that? What is pipeline right now? When we look at leads volume, how much is spam? Like, I can go to someone and say, we got 50% more increase in leads in Q2. But if the majority of them are spam, that doesn't actually drive value. So to be able to answer those questions, I'm going to do this. So let me share my screen for a second and make this smaller. So what I'm going to do is, let me find share screen. Okay. So I have raw data here. This is made up data for 3 months, and it's got a few pieces of information, right? Who's the lead that came in? What's their phone number, email number? What's lead status, pipeline value, end date? And let's say you're in a situation in which you have to pull trends around lead volume, around spam, around opportunity, around pipeline from this data. It doesn't seem like a lot, but you can actually use Google Sheets for free to be able to do that. And what I want you to walk away from this conversation is, if you have this level of data, which you could argue isn't a lot, you can quickly answer and visualize what's lead volume over time, what's the trend that's happening, is this turning into opportunities, what's the pipeline trend, how much have you closed, and just really be really comfortable with this data. And I want to give a disclaimer. I had heard of pivot tables before Gorilla. I'd never used it. So if you see me using a function that you're like, what is this black magic? I learned it in the last 6 months too, and I love it. And I think once you figure out how to do it, it is awesome. So what I'm going to do is show you how to pull and query this data to be able to get really cool reporting and figure out what's happening in the data. But before I go, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you a question, and maybe this is where you were just about to go, but like, Moby, how do you pull this data? Is it being pulled manually? Could it come out of like an ERP system?
No. That's a great question. So unfortunately, if you are here or you're looking at Google Sheets for data, it has likely been exported from your tool. And what I would say is, what you can do, and this is what I've done, is export all content and lead data, because sometimes you'll have 20 more columns. Export for the time period that you want to study. If that's 5 years, fantastic. If that's 3 months like this, fantastic. Or if you've just had data for the last 3 weeks, and that's meaningful to you, pull for the time range you want to study and export it from whatever tool you use, if you can do that. If this is manual, that's what we're stuck with.
Yeah, because you likely have something on your website that is pulling in leads. So even if it's like a gravity form in WordPress and you're just manually pulling, I think you can export those into a spreadsheet too. There's hopefully something, but there might be some manual collection too. If there's like a shared sales email inbox that's fielding requests that you have access to. I mean, I've done that, like literally counting up the number of email requests that I'm seeing in an inbox. So there's lots of ways that this could be pulled. I just wanted to ask about that before you dive in.
How much of a time commitment is the curation side of this, Moby, you think?
That's a great point. And I'll tie that with what I'm seeing in the comments, where people have CRMs, but sales might not report on it. You might not be using it as a true CRM. So this is a very manual process, and it hurt my brain to have to learn it. But once I was able to make the visuals that I wanted, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. So this is manual. It takes time. I would not do this every week or every month. If you are in a place where you get high volume of leads and you want to study that and you have to do it manually, once every 2 months, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, that should be enough. Otherwise, you're going to be spending 5 to 6 hours straight just doing this every week, every month, which you don't want to. So I think you don't want to do this too much, because it is cumbersome to add this, add new data to this. But you might walk out of this and be like, Moby does it in 20 minutes. I can do it in 5. So you'll have to figure out your speed there. So let me jump into how to go from this to the data that you want. There is 3 levels. Number 1 is just identifying variables that you need, that you want to report on. Number 2 is identifying the questions that you want answered. And number 3 is actually going in and building everything that you need. I practiced this twice, by the way, because I was nervous of making pivot tables in front of everybody. And that is something that you might feel too, and it's okay. So first question is, what variables do you need in order to report to the level you want? For some of you, this might be enough, where you have contact name and you have lead status, you may have pipeline value, and you might have date. For some people, you may have a lot more data. Source, where this was imported from, their last touch, self-reported attribution. You could have a lot of different fields, but really what's important to look at trends is simply the existence of a row, lead status. Hopefully you have that. If not, that's still okay. You can do that later on. And then date. Cherry on top is pipeline value and phone number and email and whatever else. But really, you only need a few pieces of data here. And from that, you can actually pull more and more data. So for example, let's say I have this made up data over here. I'm like, okay, I know that I have 3 months of data and I want to track things week over week, month over month. I can go into Google Sheets, click it, and add in a formula which says, give me the week number of the year from this date. So if I just type in week number and click that column, it will give me the week for that. So now I have another piece of data. Like, all right, I can actually look at my data and report week over week. Or you're like, week over week, that's going to drive me insane. I want to do month over month. So you can choose the formula of month and select that and select your date, use formula month, and do that for this. And now you're suddenly able to see this for month over month over month.
Quick clarification question there, Moby.
Yes.
Is date supposed to be the time that the lead was input into Excel or the status?
Oh, great question. I think this is date added the first time, or date of lead first time, not updated, not exported, date added, the first date they came in.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, please do jump in questions because I just go through pivot table. Okay, so now I have some data that I can look at and say, I know I have enough here to build out some trends. And now the question is, what do you want to learn from this? And you might be looking at this piece of all you have and saying, what I really want is to figure out what's lead volume over time, over month, over weeks. What's the category? How much is qualified? How much is no response? How much is working? How much is spam? All of that. I want to know that every single week, every single month. And then we have some pipeline value. I want to see how much pipeline was created month over month over month. So I want to see all of that. And I would say if you were starting out, just like we do sometimes, the questions to answer are simple. What's lead volume over time? How do we break that down? How much is spam? How much is qualified? How much is right fit? How much is unqualified? And 3, what is pipeline looking like and what is deals? Those are the 3-4 questions that if you're able to answer that, that is enough for the business to start off with. So I'm going to start doing that. But before that, any comments, questions from the team, from the group?
We had a question in there related to how to work with sales when they own the leads process. So just in full, what can we do as marketers when sales owns the leads after they come in and we have no clue what the lead status is?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, I've dealt with this in the past, like where we're able to collect leads in the CRM, but sales is not using the CRM to manage deals. And I've done some manual reporting with that. And I think this can work if you don't have a huge volume of leads that you're asking for feedback on. But I would send a spreadsheet to kind of the sales leader, your best friend on the sales team, and lay out the deals. And maybe it's like 20 a month or something, and just ask them to go through that and update like if anything came of them. Because a lot of times like the sales team, like again, assuming it's not a huge volume, like they might just be able to recall those numbers pretty easily. They might not. You'll want to ask them like, is this a huge lift to manually put things in a spreadsheet? If it takes them like 10, 15 minutes, I feel like that's a really fair ask to just give them something like this raw data and ask them to just fill out an approximate pipeline value. Even if it's not perfect, if you can report on approximate pipeline value, that's still going to give you really good directional information. It's an annoying manual workaround, but it allows you to start proving out value, and it allows you to make a really easy comparison. Like this would be so much easier to do in a CRM if we had one. So that's kind of how I've gotten around it in the past. Moby, I don't know if you had any other tips there.
Very similar, where if sales is not working with you to be able to get the level of data that you want, you can break it down into 2 levels. One is just lead quality based on what information you have. And this does not mean, this literally could be bad, good, great. And this could be 1, 2, 3. So this tells you on a high level, looking at the information that is coming through a form, how does sales rate it? That is incoming quality. And then the next is status, which is going to be hard to do. Like what actually happened with this lead? So if you're stuck in a situation which you're not getting the information you need, I would ignore things like status, like closed, and I would just focus on lead quality so that you can still look at what's coming in through marketing and make assessments of, we saw a 30% increase and we know that 60% of that was right fit and good leads as told by sales. We're doing the right things, even if we don't have downstream data or visibility into what happens to those leads. So I would just start off with lead quality. Like Aaron said it really well, just ask a best friend or harass sales until they give you that data.
Moby, another question. Oh, sorry, Aaron.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead, Alan.
Another question from the chat here, but you mentioned that you could choose more fields than the ones that you have here. So what questions should people be asking themselves in their company to decide what fields they should have at the bare minimum and decide what they maybe could track but don't need to track?
Oh, that's a great question. So what I do, and this is me looking out for myself in the future, I like to export with as many fields as possible. And this could be 100 or so. Let's say this is 100 or so columns, but like I'm not dealing with 10,000 rows. It allows me to later on figure out, it allows me to do 2 things. Number one, if 6 months down the line, I've built this entire model in Excel, and there's a piece of data that there's a column which now I know is important, I can pull that in without changing anything. So I like to do that. Number 2, if you have a set export from HubSpot, let's say, which exports like this, in this exact order: contact name, phone, email, lead status, pipeline value, date added. What you don't want to do every single month is export and the order be different. For example, if I moved month here, and I'm just making this up, and I'm exporting for HubSpot, it is going to copy paste date added under month, and that's going to ruin my entire thing. So I like to have the original, as many columns as possible, and not change the column order. So when I'm copy pasting other pieces of data, it doesn't mess up my table, and I don't have to do anything. That's the lazy person answer. The true thing is, I think this information is enough. You can make your own judgments. I just like to stick with as much data as possible, and I just hide what I don't need like this.
Yeah, I think like the biggest things that are going to make an impact are high intent lead trends and pipeline trends that you have. So any like deal data that you can get and any like lead volume, lead quality data you can get. Just think about like, what kind of story do you want to be able to tell in 6 months around your reporting? And what's the bare minimum amount of data I need to be able to do that? Because especially if you're doing this all manually, you don't want a bunch of different inputs, right? So that's how I would think about it. Just like what would yourself 6 months from now wish you would have been, collecting data on?
Exactly. And I'll make this, so I'm just gonna hide phone and email because I don't need it right now. And I'm just gonna build it off of this. So time to jump into pivot tables.
Let's do it.
So I just select all, and you guys might have more familiarity with pivot tables than me, but I'm just sharing this for me if I was watching this without knowing. I just select all the data that I want with Control A, and I click insert, and then I say pivot table. And it's already selected the range that I selected. Fantastic. And I'm going to go into new sheet, and I'm just going to go to something I named as reporting IML and click somewhere. And actually click here so I can get that data. And now it's created a pivot table. The technical explanation of a pivot table is beyond me, but I know that I can query and poke the data and get a lot of different kinds of values. So here's what I'm going to start doing. I know that the first question I want to answer is, what is lead volume over time? So the variables that I want are leads and then time. So I'm going to decide, the first thing I care about is lead volume over weeks. So on the right, you'll see that I can select the data that I have, and I can just say week. Okay, week popped up. I'm going to drop that in a row, which is going to create a table which has every single week that I have data from, 1 to 12. So that's 3 months of data. Like, okay, I now have a table that is parsing the data that I have, and it will tell me what's happening week over week. And I need to add some value to it. So I'm just going to take lead status and drop that into values. And there's a few things here. What I'm telling Excel is, hey, for every single week, give me the count of lead status, which is basically the row. And if I do sum, I think it's going to mess up because that's not really a thing. If I do product, that doesn't mean anything. I just want the count of leads every single week. So now I have, for every single week, a count of leads. And I'm like, okay, I'm looking at this data and it's telling me we started out from 10, 21, but there's up and down. I don't really know what's happening. So I'm just going to select all of this and click insert and say chart. And instantly I get it visualized, and boom. And I can just rename this chart called, what is lead volume over time, over weeks? And I can just call it week over week. And boom. If the data here changes, let's say I accidentally delete 25 things or I add more things, all I have to change is the data input for this pivot table, and it will automatically change everything. And now, boom, it's visualized. And it's not telling me much. So I'm like, okay, week over week is not that useful for me. I want to learn something. And you might be saying, I want lead volume over a month, which might be more relevant if you're doing longer periods of time. You might also do quarter. So I'll just copy paste my pivot table. And I have weeks right now. Instead of weeks, I'm going to cut that out and choose month, because I use the formula, and it's going to go here. And I've got the same table. And all I have to do is select that and insert and do chart. And now I have what is lead volume over time monthly. That is level 1. Like, all right, we've got lead volume. Fantastic. I'll jump into more things, but Aaron, Ellen, comments, questions, concerns?
Yeah, I think Moby, you make a good point about lead volume, looking at it weekly versus monthly. And this is just for one quarter. Like if you're analyzing years worth of data, you could even look at this on a quarterly basis. But you can just see on the weekly level, the bars on that bar graph are going up and down a lot. There's a lot of noise there, and it's kind of hard to tell what's happening. But on the monthly level, you can see it's just 3 months of data, but it's a clear up and to the right trajectory that just kind of takes out some of that noise that you saw on the weekly level. So I like how you broke it out on both.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now the question becomes, let's say that you have this data and you're like, this is cool, I'm glad we're going up, but I noticed that from month 1, when we started doing XYZ marketing activity, we saw more leads come in, but a lot of them a lot of that was spam. I want to know what actually happened with these leads. What's the quality of these leads? So I'm going to select, you could create a new pivot table by selecting this everything again, and then making a pivot table just like I did by inserting. I just copy it. I select it and I copy it. So I'm like, I don't want to do extra work in Excel. So now I'm like, okay, I've got a table which says month over month. This is the count of leads. I want Excel to break it down by lead status. So we've got lead status here. And again, you might not have lead status throughout a life cycle. You just might have lead quality as told by a salesperson or your sales team or even yourself. You might have lead quality, which could be spam, not right fit, qualified, fantastic, hypothetically. And you could use this. So I will just drag lead status to columns. And now it's given me a table which says, for month 2, you had 4 close lost, 4 close won, no response 38, this. So now I have a whole data. I have a table around this. I have no idea how this pivot table actually works, but I love it. I think it's magic. So I'm going to select this all and insert a chart. Now, previously you've seen me insert charts and magically there were the exact right charts we needed. Sometimes that happens with these more complicated tables. Sometimes that doesn't, and you have to mess around with it. So yeah, so right now, this to me is like, what is happening here? So if I look at this and you're in a situation where you look at a chart and you're like, this is not what I want. I'm looking at all of this. It's month is included in this chart. Grand total is included in this chart. So let's problem solve this. I'm going to go back to my chart and I see that I am showing totals for lead status. Let me take that out. Boom, gone. And then month is also showing up in this data. So I'm like, okay, what do I do here? So I'll just double click my chart. And honestly, I just scroll to the bottom here and I select one of these buttons until something works. Because that's usually how you problem solve this. You would just keep doing this until something works. And now I have close one that it's not enough for me. This is not telling me the data that I want. So I'm going to play around with this. There you go. Literally, I pressed a few buttons until something worked. And now I have month over month data about what is happening in each of these leads. You'll see a lot of different options. It is unlikely you will have data like this. This is a lot of fake data. So I just said, we know everything about spam, qualified, close one, but it allows me to say some trends like qualified leads. It went up. We went from 24 to 32 to 52. That's great. I can talk about that. Close lost, or this is working. We still have a lot of working leads to go. Not right fit. We saw a decrease in month 2 and we saw a decrease in month 3 as well. Fantastic. No response. As we started this new marketing activity, we went from 4 no responses to 38, which is huge. And that might be a level of concern for me. But if I look at qualified, I'm like, that's worth it. It is worth it for me to have an increase of 34 no response leads to get an increase of 8 qualified leads over time. So that is the second level of data that you can pull. And this gives executives a great idea. And you also, hey, we started this marketing activity in month 1 and we saw this increase. What does that actually mean? So I'll pause here before jumping on the next one. Comments?
We had a quick clarification question from the chat. But does this involve repeat business or is this just new leads? And if it does involve repeat business, how do you think about that differently?
Oh, that's a great question. So this data that I made up and modeled after a friend's Facebook ads, this is all new. If it is repeat data, then I can assume one of two things. Number one, that is going to be a repeat row, so I can still count that, or it's not going to be, so I can't look at repeat business. Really depends on how you structure your account and leads, because in most CRMs, contacts are different from accounts, and when you export, the settings are different. So I can say I can't give you a clear answer. I can just say it goes one of two ways. Either you will have a separate row for that repeat business, or you will not have a separate row. And that tells you the option. It doesn't answer your question.
Yeah, like if you're counting leads based on create date, you're only gonna have one create date for repeat business. But if you're looking at deal data, that person would have multiple deals still. So I think maybe that's a good transition, Moby, if you were going to talk about pipeline reporting next, because that would be two distinct values. If it's repeat business, that's also something you could capture in like lead status. Like closed one, and maybe their next stage is like customer. And then you can filter out and see like, okay, how much pipeline came from customer value versus like an opportunity value.
Totally agree. And one piece of one column I did not add here is an account, right? You will likely have accounts. So let's say hypothetically company A, B, C, A. It might be that you have person 104 and 144 tied to company A, and just at different dates, because that is repeat business from company A. That might be the case, and you can report on that. It is going to be almost exactly the same as this. I just didn't have this here. Okay. So now the question that you might be asking is, we have this data. I can see lead volume increasing. Fantastic. I can see a lot of different things happening, which is more qualified, more closed won. What does it actually mean for pipeline? Now, one thing I just want to call out, this is 3 months data, and this already has closed won, closed lost. That is almost impossible in B2B. You likely won't have 1 month of data 2 months ago, which has everything neatly categorized as closed won, closed lost, unless your sales cycle is 10 days. So this is fake data. So I want to know a few things, actually. I'll just play around with this here. I am seeing spam here. I don't want to see spam. I'm not right fit, no response. I don't want to see any of that. So I can just click my pivot table, go to filters, and I can drag and drop lead status. Yeah. And now this shows all the things that are available. I'm going to say, I actually want to know business impact. Now I want to know closed lost, closed won, qualified, and working. I do not want to see spam. I do not want to see right fit. I do not want to see no response. So I'm just going to click this, and now I can see, okay, I have more data. This is the increase in working. This is the increase in qualified. Without spam, without no response, we still have a positive impact on the business, which is what this answer is like. If you take out spam, if you take out no response, if you take out not right fit, do we still have a positive impact on the business? And this data tells you yes, because you have a lot more working leads, which might turn into unqualified or spam. You have a lot more qualified, and you have a lot more closed in some way. So that is filtering the data out. Now the question becomes, what's the value of these leads? Now I'm going to go back into this and just look at what's happening. So if I look at this piece of data, I can see that this company only puts their dollar value between 1,500 to 25,000 when it's qualified, closed, lost, closed won. So that's all I want to know. Over time, what is qualified value? What is closed value? What is lost value? And this could be as simple as, instead of qualified for you, this might be quoted or contract, whatever that means. So I have a new pivot table, and I'm going to say, okay, I've got month, I've got lead status, and I've got lead status here. I'm going to take out lead status, and I'm going to go pipeline. I think this is going to work. I practiced this yesterday. So pipeline. Okay, great. And I put in pipeline value in values, and I did, instead of, I can do count, which is number of leads for everything, for closed, lost, closed won, qualified, right? And I can see quickly number of leads, like, okay, same as here, but I don't want to see that. I want to see pipeline value. So I'll go into values, pipeline value, and select sum. If you want to look at another advanced piece of data, this could be average, but we don't need that here. And we've got closed loss, closed won, qualified, working, and I want to take out working. So I can do one of two things. I can take out that from lead status and say, hey, every lead that has the status working, take it out, or pipeline value. I don't know, we have 5 minutes. Remove everything that has blanks. And boom, working is gone. I'll just select this again and hope Google Sheets gives me the right chart. And it does, which is great. Sometimes it gives me this, which is not useful. I have to go to a stacked chart. And now I can see pipeline value for all 3 of these leads over time. And if I want to mess around with it and say, remove close lost, I'm just going to remove close lost and just give me qualified. Here it is. So what I showed you today was like, if you have minimal data, right? This is not a lot of information. Even if without pipeline value, you can pull a lot of visualizations and be able to report on business impact, whether it's lead volume, quality of leads, pipeline value, pipeline count, opportunity count, whatever that is. You do not have to raise your hand and say, we can't do it. This is how you do it. And as somebody who learned pivot tables literally 6 months ago properly, you got this.
Wow. Thank you, Moby. This is a great, I think starting point. If you're like, gosh, I feel like I don't have any resources. I just have Excel and a dream. And where do I start? This is a great place to start. I think my big takeaway, and also there were a lot of conversations in the chat about adopting a CRM and the price point for that and the resources required. I think anytime you're implementing a very manual solution like this, it's likely not going to be sustainable over time, but it's a great place to start and be able to learn. So I really like this as kind of like a first step in your CRM journey.
100%.
And I really appreciate you putting the thought into how to translate this to leadership and to be able to make this more effective outside of just our little marketing department.
I'm absolutely glad to do it because we find ourselves in these situations.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're just about at the 45-minute mark, which is where we always say we try to wrap up. We often go a little over that because there's always so much to learn and say in IML, but we will start wrapping up here. Good. Got some good final thoughts from Alan and Moby, and I think we got to most of the questions in the chat too. Wanted to end with a few invitations. So last episode of IML, we had Joe Sullivan come on and introduce the Industrial Marketing Collective. If you missed it, the Industrial Marketing Collective is kind of the name that we're giving to this community. And it's also a platform on circle.so where you can find like training content, office hours, templates, lots of different resources there. And there's different levels of membership. You can learn more and check it out at industrialmarketingcollective.com. We also still have the Slack channel as well to keep the conversation going. So if you'd like to join us in Slack, post in the chat right now, or you can DM any gorilla you're connected with on LinkedIn, and we'll make that happen for you. Our next episode of IML is on May 2nd, and we will be talking about knowledge extraction, getting the most from your subject matter expert interviews to write good technical content. So really excited for that one in May. Well, thank you, everyone.